Hi, my name is Matt, and for CSES this year I'm teaching a course called The Heat Is On. It's about the intersection of science and politics through the lens of climate change. And now if you've lived in the 21st century, chances are you've heard the words climate change before, and also a lot about them. But in this lesson I focus on three questions in particular, and I ask them to students. The first is, how could human activity affect the global energy balance of the Earth? The second being, how would we know if anthropogenic climate change, that is, caused by humans, is happening? The third being, if humans are to blame for climate change, what can we do to fight it? And I think this third question is the most interesting. But to answer the first one, there's a lot of really cool science, mainly physics and chemistry, that go into the global energy balance of the Earth. So essentially, how the Earth and the Sun interact in terms of energy. And one piece of the puzzle that a lot of folks don't know about is that the temperature of the Earth, the global average temperature, is controlled directly by the amount of energy that the Earth emits into the space and into the atmosphere. And when there are a lot of thick gases in the atmosphere like carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and water vapor that absorb and then re-emit the same energy back towards the planet, the Earth then has to pump more and more energy out of its surface, which then heats it up. And then to answer the question of how we know this warming is anthropogenic, scientists have looked back into ice core samples to find the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere over time, and we can find that there's a very, very sharp increase in carbon dioxide around the start of the Industrial Revolution that continues very, very rapidly to today. In fact, this increase has been over 40%, which is extremely alarming. And scientists can pin down exactly what the impact on the global average temperature is based on this increase in carbon dioxide as well as other gases. And this increase is so far around 1 degree Celsius or just under 2 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a very big deal as we discussed in the class. There are a number of effects that can come out of this. Ice caps melting, sea level rise, and I'm sure you've heard plenty of these on your own as well. But perhaps, as I said before, the most interesting of these questions is what can we do to fight this as humans? And so some of the difficulties we have at a governmental level come directly from the fact that a lot of Americans don't believe that climate change is either happening or caused by humans. And this is understandable for a number of reasons, and we can't invalidate their opinions. But even if we assume that all Americans believe that climate change is real, there still are a number of difficulties that the government legislators have to handle. Every time a new piece of legislation about climate change is introduced, for example, the Cap and Trade Bill in 2009 that President Obama tried to pass but failed because it stalled in the Senate, every time one of these bills is introduced, there's a number of people who shout out in dissent saying that this bill will harm part of the economy, will cost people more money in terms of spending it on gas, heating their homes, feeding their families, and among another of other impacts. Or that we simply can't afford it because investing in clean energy like wind, solar, hydroelectric, geothermal, that takes a lot of money and it takes a lot of planning that some people don't think we have the time or determination to actually handle. So to highlight this issue, I asked the students in my class to consider a bill that the New York State Legislature might pass that would put a 100% tax on gasoline and oil and coal in the state. And overwhelmingly, after the students discussed this question as to whether the tax should be passed, overwhelmingly they say no because it affects their livelihoods. It means that they can't drive to the store to get groceries because they have to spend so much money on gas. And even if they live in the city where they take the subway or use other forms of public transportation where they don't need to directly pay for this gas or oil, it affects the economy in other ways that aren't necessarily easily seen. So these students that have said no to this bill are the very same students that earlier in the class almost all seem to say that they're very concerned about climate change and they think the government has a very important role in fixing the problem right away and very effectively. Some of the ideas that students then come up with after this discussion, ways of replacing this bill with something better, might come about in the form of clean energy, or one idea that I really liked was that we could take the tax money that comes from this 100% tax on gas and oil and then redistribute it to everybody so that they don't actually lose any money but they're forced to then reconsider what they're spending it on because they are being penalized for spending it on oil, gas, and other forms of fossil fuels. And there are a lot of other interesting ideas that you can apply to this challenge, but in understanding that people have needs on an individual basis, the question of what can we do to fight climate change becomes far more complicated, and I think quite interesting. And I'm happy to note that at the end of all of my classes, students become very, very energetic in answering this question. They all have a stake in this, as members of our generation do, and that climate change will affect us the most as young people because the effects will turn out to be the most severe later on as the climate continues to change. And so I really hope that this has helped you, either this video or the class you may have partaken in helps you understand just how detailed and minute these decisions are. And it's not so easy as answering, should we stop it? The answer is yes, but the question is how.